Hello everyone, this is Dr. Neha Khodke. Welcome to another session of Zomeo Classroom. The case that we are going to see today is a case of simple headache. But what we are going to learn today is how we need to identify the true feeling behind any symptom in a patient, where we can go wrong, and what are the corrections that we can do. Let's start. So we start with the case of headache. A patient came with a complaint of throbbing frontal headache to the clinic. She had a handkerchief tied to her head tightly. Now this headache had happened for the very first time in her life. When we asked about the likely reason, she said her husband slapped her in front of a plumber who had come to repair a leaking tap. She said she is not allowed to appear in front of unknown men. This time, she said that she only gave a vessel to the plumber because her husband could not locate the appropriate one in the kitchen. The husband then shouted at her, abused her, and slapped her. Before we move on, now this is the background of the symptom that she came with. Now what has happened? There has been some feeling in her that has translated somatically in the form of a headache. We need to identify the exact feeling because that is very important and that is crucial in the final decision of the remedy to be given to her. So now let us see what are the likely different feelings that she could be going through after this. It could be humiliation, it could be grief, there could be suppressed emotions, it could be a vexation, a mortification, an indignation, or an embarrassment. Another likely cause that we can think of is actual physical injury because of the slap. But the slap was given to her here, the pain is felt here. So physical injury as of now is something that we will not think about. So let us think about the emotional state of this patient. So what can we do? How do we know what is the exact emotional state? Before that, let us see whether we have rubrics against each of these feelings that the patient could likely be going through. So what are the rubrics that we can think against each feeling with relation to the headache? So if it is humiliation, we have headache, humiliation from. If it is grief, we have pain, headache, grief from. Suppressed emotions, we have pain, headache, anger, vexation, aggravates, suppressed. For vexation, we have headache, vexation after. For mortification, headache, mortification from. And for indignation, we have headache, indignation, aggravates. So if you see, for each emotion, we have a corresponding rubric with us, and that is related to the pain in the head. Alright, but what we need to understand, now we cannot take all of these feelings for the patient, can we? We cannot, because we need to identify what is the true feeling or the true emotion behind the headache. So the right direction to the feeling behind the incident can only be given by the person who has experienced it. We must ask the patient instead of deciding based on our interpretations, because our interpretations could be wrong. So, many homeopaths stop at the symptoms that I had mentioned before. Okay, so she has got a headache after her husband slapped her. Now, many physicians stop there. because they have made their own interpretations as to, okay, so if her husband has slapped her in front of someone, it could be an insult, it could be a suppressed anger, or she could be feeling grieved about it. So they take their own interpretations, and that is where, friends, we go wrong, because we need to go one step further and ask the patient what she actually felt when this happened, when her husband slapped her. So, when we asked the patient what she felt exactly, she said, I felt insulted, embarrassed, and I was not able to react or express my anger at that. So, can you see? It's not a grief, it is a suppressed anger, because the base emotion or the base feeling she had was embarrassment and insult. And now we can go ahead and we can see what are the actual rubrics in this case to get the final remedy. So let's do one thing. Let's find out the meanings and the differences between each rubric. Because if you see that mortification and vexation can sound similar, humiliation and indignation can sound similar and probably mean similar things, there are very, very fine differences in each of these words, because each of these rubrics, if you see, is represented differently. If humiliation and indignation meant the same, the rubric would have been the same. If vexation and mortification meant the same, there would have been the same rubric that is mentioned. There wouldn't have been different rubrics mentioned for these different words. So, understanding the exact meaning of each word and knowing the synonyms eases the process of repertorization for us. So let's do one thing. Let's find out the actual meaning of these words or these feelings. And we can do this in Hompath using the word meaning feature. So to know the different meanings of the words, we have a feature in hompathsomeo called word meanings. Now to access that, you click on words from the menu and select word meaning. Now, when you select this, a new window opens in which you see that there are more than 1500 words whose meanings are mentioned. Now, they will help us to understand the finer differences between the words that we are looking for. So, let us find out the meanings of different words. Let us start with, say, vexation. What is vexation? So in this search bar, I type VEXA. I get the result as vexation, being troubled or distressed by something causing annoyance, irritation, dissatisfaction, or disappointment. So there is a lot of distress here which cannot be expressed, which is again something that our patient is going through. The next word, let us see, is indignation. Okay, that was one of the other words in our list. So we see, okay, now indignation, the meaning is anger mingled with disdain, extreme anger, effects of anger, righteous or dignified anger, anger excited by a sense of wrong or injustice. Now, this is not something that our patient told us, because behind the disdain and behind a righteous kind of an anger, there is always pride. She is not talking about pride. She never spoke about something wrong done with me, or I felt that something unjust was done. Her words were insult. I felt insulted. I felt embarrassed. So, indignation will not be the correct rubric for her. Let us look for the next word that we had mentioned, that is mortification. Let's see what mortification means. So, in the word meanings search bar, I type, okay, I look for mortification, and the meaning that I see is the feeling of humiliation caused by disappointment or any untoward incident. Now this is the exact feeling of my patient, because she said that I felt insulted or humiliated and I could not express it. That is mortification, and that is the main feeling in our patient. So we know that now in our patient we do not take indignation, we take mortification, we can take vexation and suppressed anger. Okay. Now let us look at the synonyms or the similar words of all these feelings. Now this is going to help us understand why certain words are similar in their meaning but are not identical, which is why they are different and which is why they have been represented differently in our repertories. So for example, if I want to look for synonyms, I click on words, and in this I select the second option, which is synonyms. Now I see a list of more than 9,000 words for which synonyms are available. Now let me see what are the synonyms or the similar meanings for the words or the feelings that we had jotted down. So if we look at vexation first, can you have a look at the synonyms that are there? Chagrin, mortification, uneasiness, trouble, harassment, irritation, annoyance, worry, infliction, anxiety. Now, vexation sort of overlaps on mortification as well. If you look at mortification, let us type mortification. Okay, now in this we will see humiliation, shame and vexation among other words. Again they overlap mortification. Now I type humiliation and you see the words that are there. Again I see mortification and shame. Shame is embarrassment. So how the words are interlinked or how the feelings are interlinked with each other but are not identical. This is the feature in Zomeo which is going to help you fine tune the rubrics that you need to take based on the feelings of the patient. Now let's go back to what we finally now consider in the totality for this patient. We now know the differences between the feelings, the differences between the words and the actual feelings of the patient, and now we are going to show you the totality for this case. So this is the totality that we have taken. Headache due to humiliation directly told by the patient, headache due to embarrassment, headache due to suppressed anger, all of this told by the patient. Headache because of mortification, because we saw the meaning of mortification and we know that this is one of the feelings that she felt. And we have also taken the location as well as the sensation and the modality, because these are also key. This particular section is going to help us decide the final remedy for the patient. Now, when you see all of these symptoms together, apart from the particulars, we have certain remedies that come to our mind. You can jot down those remedies. The final remedy will be the one or should be the one that covers all of this, not just the feeling but even the location, sensation and modality of the headache, because this is again characteristic only to the patient. Understand that even if the feelings are humiliation, embarrassment, something that is characteristic to the patient, even the location is characteristic. Maybe for another person, the somatic manifestation may have been totally different to these feelings that she felt. The somatic manifestations could have been digestive, or they could have been locomotor. So it is very important where the somatic manifestation happened, which is why we are also going to consider the location of the headache and the sensation of the headache as well as the modality. Alright. So let us see how this totality is represented differently in different repertories. The purpose is to show you that each repertory has its own forte, each repertory has its own advantages, and to help understand which repertory is the best for which type of cases. And this is why this is the interesting part, where I'm going to show you 4 different representations of the same case in different repertories. I will be showing you Kent's representation, Bonninghausen's representation, Borick's representation, and finally the representation that is seen in complete repertory. The first representation that I will be showing you is Kent's. Now understand, in each of the repertorizations that we do, we are going to, based on the totality that we have formed, we are going to take the symptoms that are identical or are the most closest or best represented in that particular repertory. Okay, so now if we consider Kent's repertory, Kent's repertorization is a little different. So in Kent, this is the representation that we saw, nearest to the totality that we have taken. So headache, vexation after, anger suppressed from, which was taken from the mind chapter. Why, we will see when we look for the rubric actually. Mind, mortification, ailments after, headache, forehead in, pulsating. So it covers both location as well as sensation. In Kent, throbbing is represented as pulsating. Now in different repertories, the phraseology is different. So we need to be a little aware as to what phraseology is used in each major repertory. And the last is headache, forehead in, pressure amelioration. Now let us start searching. Now for this session, I will only be using the command S feature, which is repertory search, for quick results. So command S, and I just type in headache, vexation. Okay. Now I get 41 search results, for which I only want to see the search results from Kent. The first is what I'm looking for, headache in general, vexation after. Vexation is a form of suppressed anger, so I will select, I check the box and the rubric is recorded. The next rubric I am going to record or search for is for mortification. So again, command S and I look for mortification. Now I will be using the repertory search feature throughout this session because it is the quickest way in which we can look for and record rubrics. So mortification, I see 30 representations in Kent, and in this, the one representation I'm looking for. Now see, if I see there is mortification ailments after in the mind chapter, I also have headache from mortification. Now why I am taking the first rubric, which is mind mortification ailments after, is because it is a general rubric that covers more number of remedies. So more number of remedies are represented, less chances of going wrong as far as remedies are concerned. So I select mind mortification ailments after. Next rubric that I want to select is for suppressed anger. So command S, suppressed anger. Okay. So now in Kent I see anger, irascibility, suppressed from. Again, the only representation for this is in the mind chapter, nothing from the head chapter. So I select this and now this is recorded. Next rubrics are with relation to the headache. So now I am looking for headache in the frontal region, which is of throbbing nature. In Kent, this is represented as headache in the forehead, pulsating. So command S and I just type forehead, pulsating. Enter. I see 62 representations. I want the first one, that is head pulsating, beating, throbbing, forehead. Or I can also take the second one, pain, headache in general, forehead in pulsating. In the first one, it is a pulsating feeling. In the second one, it is actually called pain. So I will take the second one, that is headache, forehead pulsating in. Select and it's recorded. And the final rubric that I record is a forehead headache, which is better by pressure. So Command S, forehead, pressure, ameliorates. Enter. 13 references in Kent. I am only seeing the representation of Kent because I want to show the different type of representations in different repertories. So the first one is the one that I will take, headache, forehead in, pressure ameliorates. So select. So now I have recorded 5 rubrics from Kent that are nearest to the totality that we took. Now let us see the representation of these 5 rubrics. I click on view repertorization icon on the black taskbar and I see that this is the representation. Natrum mur is the first remedy that comes up as far as totality or gradation is concerned. But if I click on symptoms covered, okay, the list has rearranged and yet natrum mur is the first remedy. So it is, I would like you to jot down the first 5 remedies because I want to show you the differences that we see when we repertorize from BBCR, Boric and Complete. So here in Kent we see natrum mur, Bryannia, Ignatia, Staphysagria and Pulsatilla. So these are the first 5 remedies in the list. Okay. Now this was Kent's representation. Let us see what is the BBCR representation or Bonninghausen's representation. So again, with relation to the totality, if we take the nearest rubrics that are found in the BBCR book, we see that firstly we notice a difference. The aggravations and ameliorations are all clubbed together in one chapter. Okay, there are no separate aggravation ameliorations with relation to location or conditions, and that is why we need to take the aggravations and ameliorations in general when we consider BBCR. So now what we see is the first, taken from the aggravation and amelioration chapter of BBCR, emotions, anger, vexation, silent grief, suppressed with, etc. Aggravation. So we see that a lot of emotions are taken together into one rubric. The next rubric that we took is aggravation and amelioration, emotions, mortification, chagrin, etc. aggravate. Okay. The third and the fourth are with relation to the head. So, throbbing and pressure amelioration. Now, if you see the difference, then in BBCR it is mentioned as throbbing, whereas in Kent and other repertories it is mentioned as pulsating. So, we also need to be aware of the phraseology that is mentioned in different repertories. So, let us see how we can take up Bonninghausen's representation. Okay, so a command S from your keyboard, we start typing the first symptom that we are looking for, which is suppressed anger. So suppressed anger. Let's go to the Bonninghausen reference, and there is only one rubric that has these two keywords together: emotions, anger, vexation, silent grief, suppressed, etc. with aggravates. And so this is the only rubric that is there, so we need to take this recorded. The next rubric is mortification. Command S, we look for mortification. Now Bonninghausen has 6 references for mortification, but not one is there in the head chapter. So again, we need to take it from the general chapter of aggravation and amelioration, emotions, mortification, chagrin, aggravate. So check the box. We have now recorded this rubric as well. The next rubric we take is throbbing. So let's do a command S and we'll do a throbbing. We'll look for throbbing. Okay, in Bonninghausen there are 160 references. Now in this we have Bonninghausen, head, internal, throbbing in general. But if you go down in the list, we also have another rubric, Bonninghausen, head, internal, throbbing, forehead. So we have, got a little more specific. And because there are 48 remedies, which is a good number of remedies, we will be taking this rubric instead of the second one in the list. So let's take head, internal, throbbing, forehead. Okay. And now the last one that we take is pressure amelioration. So command S, pressure amelioration. If you see Bonninghausen's representation, then in the head chapter, there is only one representation for pressure amelioration, which is head internal amelioration pressure. And so we have to take this rubric because we have not found anything specific with relation to the forehead. So now I select this. And now I see, based on the 4 rubrics that I have taken, what are the final remedies that I get. Okay, now Bonninghausen's representation is quite different from Kent's. Where in Kent we saw Natrum and Bryonia coming on top, here we have the first remedy as belladonna, followed by Natrum and then aconite. And all 3 of these remedies cover all the 4 rubrics that we have taken. Aconite is then followed by lycopodium and phosphoric acid. So if you see, we now have 2 new remedies introduced in our list. But we remember that among Kent and Bonninghausen, Natrum is the remedy that is covering both. So it is figuring in the repertorization sheet of both the repertories that we have taken. So now this was Bonninghausen's representation. The third representation that I want to introduce is the representation by Boric. Now Boric is one of the first clinical repertories that we have, and so it would be interesting to see what are the rubrics that are considered and what is the final result we achieve when we repertorize using Boric. So let's see the representation of Boric. Alright, from Boric, these were the closest rubrics that we could ascertain. Emotion effects: shame, mortification, reserved displeasure. Modalities: aggravation, mortification from an offense. If you see, we have taken mortification twice because we feel that both these rubrics represent our case very well. Then the other 3 are totally related to the physical symptom of headache. Now if you see, I have taken the location as a different rubric, which is frontal. I have taken the pulsating and the throbbing sensation as a different rubric, and pressure amelioration as a different rubric, because all 3 of them are represented separately in Boric's repertory as location, sensation and modality. Okay, they are not represented together. So you will not see location frontal pulsating, or you will not see headache pulsating amelioration by pressure in Boric. In Boric, you will have to take every rubric separately. So now let's see, as a different approach, what Boric shows us as the remedy. So the first we take is shame or mortification. Command S. We type mortification. Remember, we are only going to be considering Boric here. So we'll go to Boric's references, and we see that there are only 2 references for mortification in the entire repertory of Boric. One is shame, mortification, reserved displeasure, and the second is aggravation, mortification from an offense. And we will be considering both. So I will be checking both boxes and recording both. Alright. Now the next rubric that we need to record again with relation to the headache. all three separately. So location, sensation and modality, all three will be recorded separately. In boric, you don't have forehead. He makes it, he mentions it in a very clinical way like frontal. So we are going to do a command S and we will be doing headache, frontal, and we see the references for boric. We have 4 references, out of which we are going to take the first one, which is headache, location, frontal. Okay, selected and recorded. The next, we are going to do a command S for the sensation, which is pulsating. So command S, headache, pulsating. Only one rubric represented in boric. So headache, character of pain, throbbing, beating, hammering, pulsating. 38 remedies. We will be considering this rubric. And now the last selection is headache, which is ameliorated by pressure. So we look for headache, pressure, amelioration. Again, boric has a single reference for this, that is headache, amelioration, pressure, and we will be selecting it. Now it will be interesting to see what boric shows us as the final remedies. So looking at the repertorization sheet, okay. Now if we see based on the totality, we have belladonna, glonoine, argentum nitricum, bryonia, ignatia, natrimur, nux vomica, pulsatilla, gelsemium and silesia. So we have a very wide range of remedies that we get, and not one remedy that covers more than 3 symptoms that we have taken. Now this shows you the true difference between boric's repertory and a general repertory like Kent and BBCR that gives importance to even the mentals as well as the physicals, whereas boric is a repertory that is more clinically oriented, which is why you see more of a focus on the particular symptoms that we are representing here. So according to boric, belladonna, glonoine, argentum are the remedies that come first in the list. Okay. Now we go on to the final representation, which is the representation from the complete repertory. It is in this repertory that we saw a more specific representation of the totality that we had taken. And here is the totality that we took from complete. Mind, humiliation, ailments from aggravate, because we did not find a specific correlation between headache and humiliation. So we have taken the general rubric. Mind, embarrassment aggravates, ailments from. Headache, anger, vexation aggravates. Headache, mortification from. Headache, pulsating, throbbing, forehead. And the last rubric that we took is the most specific rubric that we could find, because it covered not just the location and sensation but the modality as well. So headache, pulsating, forehead, pressure ameliorates. Okay, let us now see how complete has represented the different remedies. So doing a command S, we first look for humiliation. Now in complete, if you see, the representation of humiliation is more in the mind but nothing to do in the head chapter. So we take the first rubric, which is the most general one, which is humiliation, ailments from aggravates. Okay, recorded. The next rubric we take is embarrassment. So command S and we type embarrassment. Okay, so again, the representations in complete that you see do not contain any representation of embarrassment in the head chapter. So we will be considering the most general rubric, which is mind, embarrassment, aggravates, ailments from. Okay, we have checked the box and now this rubric is recorded as well. The next rubric is headache because of suppressed anger. So let's do a command S, headache, anger. Alright, now the first rubric that you see is complete head, pain, headache, vexation, aggravates. So vexation is a form of suppressed anger. We will be considering this rubric then. It is the most specific one. Then we also have headache, mortification. Okay, so a command is headache, mortification. Okay, so we have complete head, pain, headache, mortification from with 8 remedies selected. And now the final 2 rubrics that we will be selecting are to do with the actual location as well as sensation and modality. Okay, so the next rubric is a throbbing in the forehead. So command S and I type throbbing forehead. Alright, so I have this direct rubric here, pain, headache, pulsating, throbbing, forehead from the complete repertory. I record this and now I want pulsating headache in the forehead, which is better by pressure. So a command is throbbing forehead pressure. Select and see the first rubric, pain, headache, pulsating, throbbing, forehead, pressure, amelioration. Again the exact rubric that I am looking for. I select this and now this rubric is recorded as well. Now let us see what complete repertory is telling us. We have seen all the representations up till now of the older repertories. Let's see what this modern repertory says. Okay, so now the complete repertory, if I go by symptoms covered, shows me the first remedy as platina, followed by colocynth, ignatia, natrum and belladonna. Now platina and colocynth were 2 remedies that were not seen in any of the previous representations that we had in Kent, BBCR and Boric. So these are new inclusions from the complete repertory. But now out of all the representations that we have seen, we see that natrum is the only remedy that is seen in all 4 representations of Kent, of BBCR, of Boric and complete. And that is why finally natrum was given to this patient of headache. So now the final remedy that was given to this patient was natrum 1M single dose. Now within 3 hours, again because this is an acute case, we need to take a follow-up very frequently, because if the relief is not seen within the first few hours, we need to change the remedy because the remedy is not correct. Now this is in case of acute disease. Okay. Now patient followed up within 3 hours that the headache was better by 40%. So she was not told to repeat the remedy, she was only given SL. After a week she came back saying that there is no headache. So no need to repeat the remedy, just a single dose of natrum was given. So what is the learning that we get from this case? It is important to know the difference between blind interpretation and actual feelings of a patient. We often let our prejudices cloud our judgment of feelings in a case, and this is where we go wrong. Knowing the exact word meanings helps us in defining the finer shades of emotions. Synonyms guide us many times to fine-tune the actual emotion behind a case. So thank you everyone. I hope that you have taken away something different, a different type of learning from this case, and it will help you decide in future which repertories you can consider for each of your cases. Every case may require a different repertorial representation based on what is seen in the patient, what is felt by the patient. So see you in the next session. Thank you and take care.